Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the Game for God channel. We are back on our regularly scheduled programming talking about the fruits of the Spirit, and we are up to forbearance, so the fourth kind of component, forbearance, or as some translations refer to as patience. And we'll break down what this kind of means, forbearance, what is it actually getting at in a second, but I want to talk a brief bit about what it is about this forbearance that I want to talk about. And I've kind of come to the conclusion this is kind of the quote unquote countercultural component in the fruit of the Spirit. Living as a Christian is countercultural enough as it is. The principle that we as people are fundamentally flawed, we are sinful, we are wrong, we make mistakes, and that our redemption is exclusively through the death and resurrection of Christ. It's nothing that we do. It's nothing that we seek approval from other people. It's something that very much goes against what a lot of modern society says, that we are each right in ourselves because we know what's best for us because it's about us. The world nowadays has a very self-centered philosophy that we put ourselves first, that we do what we think is right for us, and that's not what being a Christian is. Now, obviously, it's a lot more nuanced than that, and but you look around today, and that is the broad view that a lot of the world generally takes, is we look out for ourselves, we are number one. A lot of people might not like to admit it, but that is the case. So how is this then forbearance countercultural? And I want to try and keep referring to it as forbearance, because if we look back at the original texts, Galatians was originally written in Greek, and Paul uses this word macrothymia, and as a lot of Greek words, it's formed up of two parts. You have makros and thumos, and those two mean long and then passion or anger, respectively. So it basically means long-tempered or, slow to anger, and that's something that we'll come back to. And it does obviously also expand in translation to patience. This idea that I'll come to again later, called emotional patience, but also in a broader sense. And so I've kind of thought about this and lumped it kind of into two separate bits, and that is patience in waiting and patience in surrender, or forbearance in waiting and forbearance in surrender. So let's just jump into this. Forbearance in waiting. And this is kind of, this would be the point that would be patience in the broad sense. It's no secret the world is getting more and more instant each day. Internet gets faster. Information from the other side of the planet can be in our hands in a matter of moments. Travel is getting quicker and more efficient. To put it broadly, the ability to do stuff as a human race is getting quicker and quicker. Except roadworks. They always seem to take like 5 million years, wherever in the world you are. But I digress. Now, this is obviously not all bad. We can see friends and connect to different people and cultures quicker, without instant long-distance communication. Being able to chat with my family from the other side of the planet would be significantly more difficult, if not downright impossible. But intentional or not, this kind of speeding up is making us less and less tolerant to waiting, to delays, to just gaps when we're not doing stuff. And these times of waiting are actually really, really important. I kind of discovered this the hard way towards my end of time at university, when I got so caught up in myself trying to do everything as quick as possible and have as little down doing nothing time as possible that I really worked myself into a pretty bad place. I was practically sprinting anytime I needed to walk anywhere, between lectures, to and from church, to and from, friends' house in the evening. And the second I'd get in the door, I'd be like, right, down, what's the next thing to do? And I'd do that, and I would not slow down pretty much until I went to sleep, and then I'd wake up in the morning and to do it all again. And it very quickly became apparent that as I got more and more tired, as I just got physically and mentally exhausted, it was because I wasn't having these waiting times in my life when I could sit and just be patient. And it just goes to show that, yes, patience, forbearance is important for ourselves, for our own well-being, but also important for what we're being patient at. If we go back to when I was talking about love, I mentioned a verse in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 exactly. It starts off with love is patient. Our patience in situations, our forbearance in situations, is a demonstration of love. It's a demonstration of appreciation for whatever we're patient for. If we wait for a friend to arrive, if we wait for a train to arrive, it shows that we are appreciative of the people and services around us. We don't walk up to a place and then, as we're waiting for it, or if it's just a couple minutes late, we get really worked up and really angry. That's not how we show love to something. It is our patience, our forbearance in these situations that shows love. But that's not really kind of what the main point of this is. As I said before, this idea of macrothymia, the Greek word, this long-temperedness, this slow to anger, this restraint in ourselves. There is an emotional aspect to it, emotional forbearance, I've called it. And as we see in the Bible, in most cases, it is about being slow to anger. Again, that idea of thymia, that kind of temper, passion. Ecclesiastes 7:9 says, "Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools." James 1 verse 19 to 20, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." We should have forbearance in these volatile emotional situations, because when we act out, when we're rash, because we don't control the emotional decisions that we make, it can be dangerous for ourselves, for others, for our relationships with those around us and with God. Elaine and I were reading recently about how the tongue can be dangerous, and one of the things we talked about again was when we lack the emotional discipline, we can act out, we can say stuff that we don't have. When we lack this forbearance, this macrothymia, bad stuff can happen very quickly and it can get out of control very quickly. If you go all the way back, and the thing that I've been kind of saying repeatedly throughout the little mini-series we're doing here is the idea that the fruit of the Spirit grows within us. This is not a constant bit of our character within us. Some people are very short-tempered, some people are very long-tempered. We act as the Bible says. We grow our faith, we grow the fruit of the Spirit. We grow in our forbearance, and we gain a spiritual maturity that is then reflected in our real life. It helps us be more controlled in emotional situations. It helps us be more thoughtful in our words. And while the world is trying to tell us to be very quick, to be instant as everything else around us is, and certainly one of the things that I got caught up in a bit when I was younger was this idea that with the world moving so quickly, if you don't keep up, you're going to get left behind, and that's not the case. If anything, we shouldn't want to keep up with the world because we should be on our own path with God. And the more we're trying to keep up with the world, the more we strive towards the world, the more we stray from God. And that's not what we want as Christians, obviously. So now the second part that I broke this down into is forbearance in surrender. And so earlier I talked about how the kind of modern culture is to tell us that our lives are our own. We do what we want with it because it's ours. You can hear stuff like, we make our own destiny, or, if you deserve something, then you should just take it, or, you decide what happens in your life because, again, it's your life and it's yours alone, and you can do what you want. Now, again, as I said before, there's a lot of nuance in this, but at its fundamental core, particularly what you'll see around online and stuff, is that, if you want something, if you want to be successful, then you got to take hold of it yourself and, do it. And this isn't the picture that we have for our life, because as a Christian, we believe that God has a plan for our life. We believe in God's plan. We believe that God's plan is good and what is best for us. And that requires a level of forbearance to trust God, even when we don't know what is ahead. To speak on a couple verses in this, Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Romans 8:28 as well, very, very well-known verse, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. The fact of the matter is that trusting God's plan for our lives requires this forbearance and sacrifice. It requires us to withhold ourselves, restrain ourselves from acting brashly, acting on our own thoughts first, and acting on what we want, and waiting, being patient to listen to what God has to say for us. There are many cases in my life where I've had to be patient and wait on God's timings for events in my life. Places where the world would say that I should go out and take what I think is right for me, and later turned out, what I wanted is not right for me. Go back and watch my last video from 2 weeks ago if you want a bit more detail about it, but looking at where I wanted to go to uni, I had this real desire to go to Oxford University. That was what I wanted to do, and I really strived to do that, but God's plan was something else, and I had to be patient in that. I had to be patient and be like, okay, God is changing my plan of where I want to go. Let's just wait and listen to what God has to say for this. My initial reaction was very emotional. I was devastated to not be going to Oxford, but I didn't act out brash and irrationally and go, no, I refuse to do that. My plan is the right plan. I have to go to not Australia, Oxford. I had forbearance in my emotions, eventually, and trusted God's plan and let that show to me. Even now, as I'm in Australia in a very big turning point in my life, I don't know the plan ahead, but I have to have forbearance to be able to listen and stay in tune with what God wants for me. Now, this is not to say that we just need to sit around, wait for doors to open, God's got it all worked out, and we can kind of just sit and do nothing and God will drag us along behind us. Like, far from it. The thing about doors opening is you still need to knock. Otherwise, whoever's on the other side of them doesn't know somebody wants to come in. Similarly, this isn't to say that we shouldn't have plans or ambitions. If I didn't have that ambition to go to Oxford, I wouldn't have had the same drive that I had in my academic studies, which I've then managed to use in my time where I then eventually went to uni and further on through my life. It's good to still have ambitions and goals, but we have to remember that ultimately it is God's plan that is best for us. We can have plans, we can have goals, but we have to be ready that they might change. Proverbs 16 verse 9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." my heart has been in a number of different places throughout my life. It's been in Oxford, it's been in Australia, it's been in the UK. Just sometimes God has helped me along, and God's plan and my plan has aligned, and it's aligned brilliantly. Sometimes the steps that God has taken me on have taken me in a different direction to where my heart wants. And that's really difficult when you have to do that. Any long-time Christian will probably be able to tell you of a time, at least a time, when their personal conviction and God's plan has diverged. And I can almost guarantee you every single one of them will say, once they've gotten after that period, they'll look back and they'll see God's plan was definitely better than my plan. And so these situations, we have to surrender ourselves to God and his plan. And that requires forbearance. It requires us to be slow in our temper. We have to be restrained and patient with God. God's timing is unknown. We don't know the intricacies of God's plan for our life. Only God knows that. And only God can reveal that to us when the time is right. Now, sometimes he'll reveal that plan to us in very good time, and we can see months, years ahead of what God has planned for us. And that's great when that happens. That's really nice. I've experienced that. You know, my time at uni, I was like, God's got a great few years planned ahead of me. I can see, you know, getting involved in band and getting involved in leadership. I can see that. I got my job in Australia initially, and I was like, great. God's got this amazing plan for me in Australia. We're going to do great things here. And again, I've been able to step into leadership and band roles here in Australia. Other times we get to moments like where I am now in life, when I don't know what is next. I am still waiting on God for a sign as to where does God want me next. I've got about as far as it's not in Australia. And it can be very easy, and I felt times when I felt a lot of turmoil inside, and the response that I want to have is very emotional and raw, and just to crack on with stuff and be like, what's going on? There's nothing ahead of me. But you have to learn to have forbearance. You have to learn to have restraint and patience in a time like this. God will reveal to you his plan when the time is right. It may not be when the time is what we think is right, but it will be right. Sometimes it's last minute, sometimes it can feel like it's after last minute. Sometimes it can feel years in advance. But we have to trust God, and we have to trust his plan. So, to kind of summarize this point, because I do feel like it's been a bit of a weird one to plan for me, because again, I'm also in the process of like packing up and organising flights and stuff to get back to the UK. I'm 6 days away from flying home now, so I have a lot going on at the minute. But yeah, so this idea of forbearance, it's not a direct translation of or into patience, as some translations will call it, not necessarily in the broad sense, though I still think it has merit being interpreted in the broad sense. It comes from this word macrothymia, long-tempered. The ability to remain steadfast, to have restraint in our emotional response, to be slow to anger. And so we see this in the physical act of waiting. As I said, the very countercultural act of not rushing into things, not doing things as we want when we want, but enjoying the time that we have of doing nothing. And also this forbearance in surrender, this idea that we surrender ourselves to God, or we surrender our plans to God and have the patience to trust God's timings and trust God's plan, and the acceptance that God's plan might be different from ours. But that'll be it from me for today. Join the Discord. There'll be a link down below if you want to ask questions for a bit more clarity on anything. If you want to just chill and play some games with us. As I move back to the UK, my computer will not be coming with me immediately, but I'll still have my laptop and my Switch to chill, play some fun games on there. And yeah, just I like to keep in mind that that's what this is about. This is a place, this is casual place. Like, don't get me wrong, these YouTube videos are perhaps a bit more on the serious side, but our Discord is really where we want the main kind of ministry to be. We want to make a chill place to play games, chat about God, chat about food, chat about whatever. But that'll be it from me for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!